Well, this sure is throwing a heck of a lot of stuff at the wall. Moon Knight, episode 5, penultimate episode for this miniseries. And let me tell you right now, boy, do I wish that this was getting more than 6 episodes. And that is neither particularly high praise nor much of a condemnation. This is not me saying it's completely botched because it's only 6 episodes long, nor is it me going, I want so much more. I just feel like what they're doing would have benefited from just a little more space and a little more breathing room. To put it another way, I think it would have been really cool to do basically a whole episode just set within the psych ward, keep it there, then bring in I can't remember her name. The hippo. I'm really sorry. I would butcher it even if I can remember it. Bringing her in and then having that be the next episode and have that be the focus on maybe start to dip back into the psych ward again. I just feel like the psych ward was begging to be almost an entire episode on its own, and there isn't space for it to be that. So that's kind of what I mean. And also I'm looking at the fact that, potential spoiler, I guess, we still haven't introduced Jake Lockley as an alter. Let's be honest, we saw him in this. If you missed it, there's a bit where when he's in the psych ward and when he grabs the glass, I don't know what it was, whether it was a paperweight or a prize or whatever, but this little piercing glass thing, he stands up, he's talking, a little bit like this, a little bit more sort of, almost like Brooklyn kind of thing.
I mean, they must pay you a lot of money in this place. You're really good. I tell you what, I feel like $1 million. Never felt so good.
That's Jake Lockley. And if you don't know from the comics, Jake Lockley is another alter for Moon Knight who is a cab driver. So, the persona fit. And they've obviously hinted at there being a third alter because, we've seen, we saw, the locked sarcophagus. Somebody was banging to get out. We've now had this initial glimpse of Jake, even though he's not identified as such. And I'm just kind of left thinking, you're wrapping this entire thing up next episode. So if we get a proper introduction to him, there isn't going to be time to do much with it. There isn't going to be time to actually explore that. Explore how he's different from Steven and Mark. Explore where he comes from. Because this is, and again, I can't speak to the sort of accuracy of this, but it is sort of using the traumatic event creates an alter thing, in that certain alters are best geared for dealing with certain circumstances. We get that here with Steven basically being presented as a version of Mark that doesn't have to deal with the reality of his home life as a child. So if we're going with that pattern for where the alters come from, where the heck did Jake come from? Or what brings him out versus either of the other two? So I'm not saying we won't get answers. We probably will. We just aren't going to have a lot of time to explore those answers. And this is the kind of thing that I would hate to see get rushed. Actually, if I'm being honest, I think what's most likely to get rushed is we'll probably spend more time on Mark and Steven's psychology in the final episode, but the action conclusion, that'll probably be rushed. Or at least that's how I would like it to be. Because what is more unique about this is the psychological stuff. And, if we're going to shorten something, shorten the action beats. They've been fine, but that's not what I'm here for. That's not what continues to have me intrigued. Anyways, tragic backstory time. Whew. So, yeah, Mark had it rough growing up. I had kind of suspected this would be the case because I'm pretty sure it's the case in the comics as well. But it is interesting just to realize that we've come into this from the perspective and have largely had the POV character be the alter, not the core or original, quote unquote, personality. Because Mark's the original. Mark was there first. Steven came later. And it's just kind of interesting that Steven has really never stopped being our POV character. Like, we've gotten to know Mark a little bit, but Steven has always been the character the audience is intended to most relate to. So it's really interesting to realize that the person we've been relating to most is not the core personality. I just kind of find that interesting. Again, I suspected it because Mark is the core personality in the comics too, I'm pretty sure. So I suspected this was the case anyway. I just find that kind of neat. This one was a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. And if I can be completely honest, I don't know how hard certain parts of this hit me have to do with the merits of the episode itself, and how much of it is just like I've had an off week, and I feel like my general reactions and responses have just been a little bit heightened, like on their own. So I don't know how much of it is that, or how much of it is the actual merits of the storytelling. But I'll tell you, I did choke up, and what made me choke up, I have at least a suspicion. If other people got choked up by parts of this, it's probably not from what got me. Or at least the main thing that got me. Because, like, a little bit, Mark breaking down on the street because he didn't have it in him to go into his mother's funeral, which, like, I get it. Based off what we saw, yeah, I get it. But what I appreciate about that, because I'll come back to the thing that hit me hardest. But what I appreciated about that scene is that it's not placing a ton of moral value on Mark's inability to go into the funeral. I mean that positive or negative. It's not treating it like some kind of standing up for himself moment because he won't go and honor her memory, nor is it treating it like he's a bad person because he can't bring himself to do it. It's treating it like what it is. It's treating it like trauma. And trauma, while not a good thing ever, to have to go through, your responses to trauma oftentimes don't carry an inherent moral good or evil. It's just you're trying to cope right up to the point that you can't. And in Mark's case, the point at which you can is when Steven comes in. Now, speaking of Steven, the moment that got me, like hit me really hard, was when Steven, when they were in the room, the childhood room, and Steven is starting to realize, well, he's realizing a couple things. One, where he comes from, and two, exactly how bad Mark had it under his mother. And when Mark pulls him out of there, Steven says, I want to see what happens. And like, it's very clear what happened. So like, as far as the show goes, I'm glad we didn't see it. We didn't have to see it. We know what it was. There's no need to show it. So I'm glad they didn't. But Mark pulls him out and he says, you're not supposed to see that. That's the point of you, that you don't see these things.
You're not meant to see that. That's the whole point of you.
And I was really, really glad Steven punched him in the face for that. I understand that Steven's coming into the world was not the standard way most people do. And I even understand why Mark feels like he has some degree of ownership or authority over Steven. But at this point, like, he doesn't. Steven is his own person at this point. And Steven is a person. And that's the thing. Mark saying that's the point of view. Boiling him down to a function. Boiling him down to a job. And the absolute disregard for him as a person. And again, like, I'm not here to have a debate over how much of a person an alter is or isn't. As far as this show's framing is concerned, as far as this narrative is concerned, Steven is a person. He is a complete person with his own wants, desires, and feelings, all of which get completely disregarded with a statement like, that's the point of view. You don't get to say what anybody's point is. You have no right. And I'm really glad Steven hit him. That beat got to me a fair bit. Another thing I find interesting about Steven in terms of where he comes from, and again, like, I'll just say it one more time. I know nothing about how valid the psychology of any of this is, so I'm talking strictly narrative, just how the narrative functions. I find it really narratively fascinating that Steven was created to be strong. That Steven was modeled after this action hero that Mark watched as a kid, with the idea that he would be strong and could handle the harder things, when what ended up happening was because Steven's actual purpose was to be detached from the bad things, meant that he didn't become that strong, blustering hero. But he did still adopt other aspects, that curiosity, that love of ancient civilizations, of mythology. He got all that, but because he was used as a way to divert from these horrible moments, he didn't have to have that kind of strength. And that whatever the original conception of what Steven may have been supposed to be, the reality of Steven is that he gets the nicer life of the two of them. And I like that Mark isn't jealous of that, or at least it's not played for jealousy. It's played protectively. Like, Mark wants Steven to be able to believe that his mother was wonderful and is still alive. He does not want to strip that illusion from him. He's not jealous of him. Steven is supposed to have a better life than him. So it's an interesting, almost paternal protective streak in that one aspect. I'm really actually loving their overall dynamic. There's a lot of layers and a lot of complexity to it. Or at least much more so than I would expect to see in a show where effectively one of them, by most normal metrics, isn't real, quote unquote. Again, narratively within this story, he's incredibly real. But, you know, the way most things would treat this would be a lot shallower than this, and a lot more of a very blunt and uncomplicated dynamic between them. Whereas this is nicely, and can we just say Oscar Isaac is really good at acting against himself. Like, he's really good at it. It works really well. So more stuff with Ethan Hawke. I really love him when Harrow is the Doctor. Like, he's been working for me as the villain too, but I really love him as the Doctor because he is riding that line that you would expect to get from a more psychological horror or psychological thriller thing of, all right, this person is getting into our hero's mind, but is that a good thing? And that sort of inherent suspicion of him, which Mark, Steven, Jake themselves actually have of him, and instilling that into the audience just in the way that he performs it. He's like, he seems like he wants to help, but something's just a little off, and it's playing really well. The goddess in this was nice. She was sweet. I like the confirmation that, like, this is not the afterlife, it is an afterlife. And that's like, yeah, that's kind of, I always love lines like that. Like, single lines done casually that just cover so much ground and like explain so much. And I also like she gives a shout out to the astral plane. That's really cool. I also like the idea that, you know, the overseers of different afterlives sort of have an awareness of what the other places are like. Like, that's cool. I like that. It's a neat notion. It was nice to hear Khonshu's voice again. I haven't really shouted out F. Murray Abraham on the voice work. And obviously they've pitched him down a lot, but oh, dang. I like that too. Given that this is a miniseries, I don't think it's a guarantee that Steven comes back. I hope he does, because I don't think it's just me that relates to Steven more than Mark. I think everything about the show has presented Steven as the more relatable of the two of them. So I really hope Steven's not gone. But given that this is a miniseries, and like that's confirmed at this point, for things like their plans for submitting it for Emmy nominations, whatever, they're doing it in the miniseries category. They're not doing it as an ongoing series. So like, that's the current plan, that this is it. And knowing that it's ending makes it viable for characters to die who, if this was a multi-season thing, you could basically guarantee they wouldn't. I still expect we'll get Steven back just because of his place in the narrative as the primary point of audience sympathy and empathy. But he might not. I hope he does, though. And as I said at the front end, I really wish this had more episodes. I feel like what it's doing well. But it could do even more with more time. Well, we'll see next week when this wraps up. Last episode next time, but what did you think of this one? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon is what pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. But even if you can't help me out there, like, share, subscribe. Those all help me out. And there's links to other things that I do down in the descriptions. Other projects, merch, things you can buy, other places you can follow me, etc., etc., etc. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. And credits. I got to shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B, Melinda Walters, Leotha Boy, TT, Bernobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.